In October 2009, a family of 3 drove into the wilderness of southeastern Oklahoma and vanished. Their truck was found abandoned on a remote dirt road in the San Bois Mountains. The doors were unlocked. The engine was off. Inside was their dog, starving but alive, along with their phones, their wallets, their GPS, and nearly $33,000 in cash sitting in plain sight on the front seat. Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison were 40 and 44 years old. Their daughter Madison was 6. They were nowhere. Search teams combed the area. Dogs were deployed. Helicopters flew grids over the mountains. Nobody found a single trace of where the Jamisons had gone or why they had left everything they owned behind in a truck on a road in the middle of nowhere. 4 years later, their skeletal remains were discovered less than 3 miles from where the truck had been found. No cause of death was ever conclusively established. No criminal charges were ever filed. No explanation was ever given. This case has never been officially solved, and the closer you look at it, the stranger it gets. I'm Your Name. Subscribe if you're new here. We cover cases like this every week. Let's go through this one from the beginning. The family. Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma, with their daughter Madison. They were a family under strain. Bobby suffered from chronic back pain and was on disability. They had financial pressures and disputes with neighbors, and in the weeks before they vanished, things had reportedly become increasingly unstable at home. Sherilyn had contacted a pastor and told him the family was under spiritual attack, that a spirit in their house was trying to kill her. Bobby had been exchanging threatening messages with his estranged father. Police found a message in which Bobby told his father he had a way to take care of him. There were also reports that Bobby had developed an interest in the occult, and that related materials were found in the house. None of this was ever confirmed or developed into a solid lead, but it shaped everything that followed. The day they disappeared. On October 8, 2009, the Jamisons drove into the San Bois Mountains in Latimer County, Oklahoma. The area is remote, heavily forested, and sparsely populated. They had been looking at a piece of land, 40 acres they were reportedly considering purchasing to build a home on. This much is established. What happened after they arrived is not. Their truck was found on October 16th, 8 days after they had last been seen. It was parked on a dirt road in the mountains, undisturbed. The keys were missing. The dog, a red heeler named Maisie, was inside the cab, severely malnourished but alive, which told investigators that the truck had been sitting there for most if not all of the 8 days since the family disappeared. The cash, $32,800, was in the front seat. This detail stopped investigators in their tracks. If the family had been robbed, the money would be gone. If they had fled in a panic, they would likely have taken it. If something had happened suddenly and involuntarily, the money being left behind made some sense. But none of those explanations accounted for all the other things left behind. The cell phones, the GPS unit, Sherilyn's purse with her ID and card still inside. Security footage from a gas station the family had stopped at earlier that day was reviewed. What investigators saw on that footage has been described by people who watched it as deeply unsettling. The Jamisons, moving between their truck and the store, appeared to be in an almost trance-like state. Their movements were slow, disconnected, mechanical. They did not appear to be speaking to each other or to Madison. One investigator later said that watching the footage made him wonder whether the family was under the influence of some kind of substance or whether something else entirely was affecting them. Nobody could say what. The search. The search that followed was extensive. Ground teams worked the San Bois Mountains for days. Tracking dogs were deployed. The terrain is dense and difficult, deep ravines, heavy brush, the kind of landscape that disorients even experienced hikers. The Jamisons had no known wilderness survival skills. Nothing was found. The case attracted significant media attention, partly because of the abandoned cache and partly because of the details emerging from the family's life before they vanished. Investigators pursued multiple theories. One was that the family had encountered someone dangerous. The San Bois Mountains have a documented history of drug activity, and a family in a remote location with $30,000 in cash could have attracted the wrong attention. Another was that the family had become disoriented and succumbed to exposure, walking away from the truck and never finding their way back. A third, which gained traction online but little support from investigators, was that the family had staged their disappearance to start over elsewhere. The problem with that theory is a 6-year-old named Madison, who has never been seen or heard from again. The discovery. 4 years after the Jamisons disappeared, in November 2013, hunters found skeletal remains in the San Bois Mountains. The remains were later confirmed to belong to Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jamison. They had been less than 3 miles from where the truck was found. The condition of the remains, fully skeletonized after 4 years in the Oklahoma wilderness, made a definitive cause of death almost impossible to determine. The medical examiner's office could not establish how they died. There were no obvious signs of trauma visible on the bones, though the absence of soft tissue meant that many causes of death would leave no skeletal evidence. The Latimer County Sheriff's Office stated that they had not ruled out homicide. They also had not ruled in any other explanation. The case was officially listed as an undetermined death investigation, a designation that in practical terms means we do not know what happened. No arrests have ever been made. No suspect has ever been publicly identified. No new evidence to public knowledge has emerged since the discovery of the remains. What we are left with. The Jamison case resists simple explanation in a way that most missing persons cases do not. The cache makes it resistant to the robbery theory. The abandoned phones and GPS make it resistant to the voluntary disappearance theory. The trance-like behavior on the gas station footage makes it resistant to the simple accident theory. The location of the remains, so close to the truck that search teams should theoretically have found them, raises questions about the thoroughness of the original search, or about whether the bodies were not in that location when searchers first swept the area. That last point is the one that investigators have been most reluctant to address publicly, because what it implies, that the bodies may have been placed there after the initial search, would transform this from a tragic disappearance into something considerably more deliberate. What is known is this: a family drove into the mountains, left everything behind, walked or were taken somewhere, and died there. A little girl named Madison was 6 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she has been in the ground in the Oklahoma wilderness since 2009. Nobody has ever been held accountable. Nobody may ever be. Some cases get solved. Investigators find the piece that makes everything else click into place. A witness comes forward, evidence surfaces. The story gets an ending. The Jamison case has not had that. After 15 years, it remains exactly where it started. A family of 3 who drove into the mountains and never came back, leaving behind a truck, a dog, and $30,000, and a set of questions that no one has been able to answer. If you know something about this case, the Latimer County Sheriff's Office is still accepting information. Subscribe for more investigations like this one. New video coming soon. I'll see you there. Subscribe. What do you think happened? Comment below. Watch next. Missing 411: Why people vanish in national parks.